Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to another show. This is our 80th episode of the Gallery. My name is Bruce Markison. As always, I'm joined by co-host and producer Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How's everything going with you, Bruce?
Things are going well. Things are going well. Really looking forward to our guest this evening because he has worked on a number of films that I really enjoy. And I know films that you enjoy as well. And he's had a wonderful career working behind the scenes in Hollywood. So we're going to get right to it, Tracy. On this week's show, our guest is William Sandell. William is a production designer. He has worked on roughly 80 films in his career, beginning in the early 70s. He first entered the movie industry as a set dresser and assistant art director for movies like Invasion of the Bee Girls and Mean Streets. Since then, he has worked on many, many notable films, including Blood Beach, Dead and Buried, one of my personal favorites, Robocop, another favorite, Total Recall, Hocus Pocus, one of my daughter's favorite movies. I like it too. Outbreak, The Perfect Storm, and Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. Speaking of that last movie, Master and Commander, William won a BAFTA Film Award for Best Production Designer on Master and Commander, and was also nominated for an Academy Award for Best Art Direction on that film. And as if that's not enough, all of that, William's also an avid collector of comic books. What I've read says he has more than 8,000 in his collection. We'll talk about that at the end of the program. But William, welcome to the Ghostly Gallery. Thank you very much for being with us. How are you?
Pretty good. It's fun to be here. Nice to meet you
Absolutely.
guys.
We're really glad. Yes, same here. We're very glad to meet you and have a chance to talk to you. So we'll jump right in here, William. Going back to when you were young, child growing up in the Los Angeles area, did you know at a young age that you wanted to work in movies and TV, or was this something that came later on?
Came later on. Uh, I don't know if it's just me or a lot of kids. I didn't know what I was going to do. It's pretty scary when you're in high school and wondering what the heck's going to go on the rest of your life. I kind of thought I might be a window dresser at Bullock's or something. If I had any sort of aspirations for something, I always took art classes in school and design classes and wood classes, but no, I'm one of the lucky ones, just living in the LA area. Uh, Sometimes I speak for USC film classes. They have a me in, like a production designer. They have a cinematographer, and they have a general film class of maybe 200 kids. And in one way, shape, or form, the question you just asked comes up, and I just say and they're horrified, of course, because they're all spending $100,000 a semester or something. But if you live around Los Angeles, you just sort of meet people that are in the film business, at least in those days. And the next thing you know, you're in the film business. So somebody says, "Hey, you want to help me with this thing?" This is when my brief stay in college, couple of years in college. Hey, you want to help me with this thing? What thing? I have to lift the couch because we're doing this thing, and one thing leads to another, and all of a sudden, I'm working on Roger Corman movie. I did a dozen Roger Corman films. And
Hmm.
art director, prop master, set dresser, stunt guy, loaded cameras. You had to be a jack of all trades working for Rogers, so you just fall into it. So I had no idea, though, that my parents weren't in the film. They were business people in the San Fernando Valley and sort of normal people. And they were at first horrified, of course, like, oh my God, what's he doing? And then later on, of course, they were in a yacht club and stuff, and they'd have me come show Perfect Storm and Air Force One. And then they were very proud of me, of course. I mean, they were great parents the whole time, but they were worried about me, because you're out of work a lot when even when I was successful, you're out of work a lot in the film business, waiting for the next thing.
Oh
But it
my
worked out
gosh.
okay.
Well, growing up in LA, were there any specific films or designers or any specific types of experiences that inspired you to pursue this as a career?
Well, my aunt, my mom's older sister, my parents are passed away, but my aunt's still alive. She just turned 100 the other day. We all went to her birthday party. She was a painter and an art teacher. And my parents took me to, when I was 10, 11, 12, they took us to a lot of art museums. So I was exposed to art, and I started designing some of these sculptures you see behind me, these Rube Goldberg kinetic sculptures. And I was making quite a bit of money. In 1970, a gallery was handling me and they were selling them to collectors. And that's how I met film people. So I was always around the art world, but Edward Ruscha, the big artist at the time, well, still a big artist here, bought one of mine. I met Marty Scorsese when he was writing Mean Streets with Martin. I met film people at Warner Brothers. In fact, I was living in Fred Weintraub's house in Beverly Hills. My parents kicked me out when I dropped out of college. So he said, "Oh, you can live up here, drive me to the studio every day and do your sculptures later." So all of a sudden I'm having dinner with Woody Allen, and Marty is writing Mean Streets, and Roger Corman's over for dinner. I'm like a kid from the valley. They're all like smoking weed and jumping in the pool naked. And I'm like a wallflower from Wallflower. So I'm eating lox and bagels at the Old World in the morning in Beverly Hills and driving this Mercedes into Warner's every day with the wave. All of a sudden, I was thrust into this whole thing. So it started, at 20, I was working at Warner Brothers, running scripts around and just doing kind of gopher work, but then doing my sculptures and selling them. And Marty was bugging me, and he bought one, and Phil, Stephen Tisch was living in our house, and the 50th richest family in the world, and his dad's on the money, he was treasurer, and I met all these people, that early on, that became. I met Roger Corman. Joe was doing the trailers, and Ron Howard was running up and down. "Yeah, you want to work on my movie, Bill? I'm going to do my first movie." And I'm like, "Well, I can't. I'm working on Night Call Nurses, but good luck, Ronnie." I'm like just this doofus nerd from the San Fernando. I'm a Valley dude, really.
Oh my goodness. Oh, what an experience. I can't even imagine. That sounds like a very cool atmosphere. Um, Now, in Bruce's intro, like he had mentioned that you were an art director and a production designer. Can you just share with us briefly what the difference is between the two of them for people who might not be aware?
Well, it's the name at the beginning of a picture that no one knows what that person does, but it has to be at the beginning of the picture, and it has to be next to the editors. So it's usually editor, me, cinematographer, director. That's in general what the thing is. But when I started, and now art directors sort of work for the production designer. But when I was younger, I have a lot of credits that are art director, but that's the only name on the screen at the beginning of the movie. You had to sue in those days to get the production design credit. Nowadays, everybody's a production designer because it's considered the head art director, and then everybody else is. So it was a little bit different when I started.
Mhm.
Uh, but that's the production designer is it's the head art director, really, of the art department. I hire the prop master and the decorator and the construction coordinator, who then hires all the other people. So uh, there's a lot going on being the production designer of the movie. It's it, I'm there with the director. I'm one of the first people on the film, usually earlier than anybody, certainly the cinematographer or anybody else. There's usually a director. I get a script, I read it, I go meet the director, and he sees if they're looking at you. Really, what they're looking at you. Can I stand this guy for 6 months and go out and have beers with him? Yeah, okay, he's qualified. Yeah, he gets my script. Yeah, but he's really looking at you like, there's a lot of personality involved. That's my take on it. I don't know what other art directors would say.
Oh,
So it's
very
kind of
cool.
cool. It's kind of cool to be in there at the beginning. You see the whole thing. I mean, a lot of pressure. When I start films, they're not greenlit. And I have to make a lot of at the end of the day, there isn't a lot of art direction. And art direction, I'm up in front of the studio uh, brass trying to explain why I need this amount of money or why I spent this amount of money. So I'm really a fundraiser for 6, 7, 8 months. I mean, on Perfect Storm, I was there at Warner's for 10 months, 11 months. Usually pictures I work on are 6 or 7 months, and then I'm out of work looking for the next picture.
Oh,
So
goodness.
somehow I did the pressure. I don't know why. I'm glad I'm retired now for the last 10 years, so I'm not doing it. I still have an agent. David Gersh is still my agent, but I told him, don't ever call me. What if I find a picture in town with your, I said, no, 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 no. He called me last year. They said, they're having a symposium of location managers in Hawaii. Would you want to go to Hawaii and talk to the location people that send you a first class ticket and they've got a great hotel and you stay in Waikiki? And okay, that I'll do because I was sitting around like a bum. So that was fun. But these days, you guys are very aware.
Yeah.
I'm sure what's going on in Hollywood. I think I got out at the right time. Really, it's just terrible here. I feel so bad for all my friends. My son's in the business. My ex-wife was a costume designer. My nephew's a cinematographer, and it's just a rough time to be. I think I was at the perfect time in the film business when I was there. I turned down 5 films for every film I took. I mean, I wouldn't leave my home in this. I had a ranch in the San Fernando Valley. I bought Marlena Dietrich's house from her, and it was a horse ranch. I turned it into a horse ranch, my wife and I, and I wouldn't go work at certain studios. They were a little too far. That's how picky. It's not how picky I am. It's how much product or films there were out there in those days. Little films, bad films, but they all stayed in Los Angeles. They all shot on stage. I mean, Blood Beach. I'd finished a movie at Paramount. Sidney Beckerman asked me. It was called The Serial. We built everything at Paramount. And Beckman was a very big producer at the time. And he said, would you ever want to do a horror movie? I'm like, yeah, tell me. He said, well, there's a little movie called Blood Beach. It's a $2 million movie and a great director, Jeffrey Bloom, who's written the script. I had the most fun. We shot in Santa Monica and we built sets at Culver City Studios and Monster Lairs and all these little pictures. They all built fun sets and interesting stuff, no matter what the budget was. The old days. And then it was after.
So basically,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
William, you're creating the sets, you're decorating the sets, you're augmenting them, maybe taking some things away, adding some things to get it to look the way the director wants it. Is that really what you do?
Yeah. I mean, when I meet the director, the director's the boss. He has a vision, and I work for the director. I walk a fine line because the studio is paying me and giving me $100 million to do some of these pictures. 140 million on Poseidon, the remake we did at Warner's for Wolfgang Peterson. I did 4 pictures for Wolfgang. He likes sets and he likes them big. You got to spend a lot of money to keep, and he attracts the best photographers, John Seal, Michael Bauhaus. So I got to work with the best cinematographers in the world, 2 or 3 times. But I've been called, like, for instance, with Wolfgang, we got to be very good friends. He trusted me. I love the guy. And I did 4 very heavy, big pictures for him, successfully did them. Made a lot of money for Warner's. But, they would call me in sometimes, and I've had variations on this theme, but one time they called me in with Wolfgang and they were asking me, this is the head of the studio and all his suits. do you really need that extra? I forget what it was, another boat or another spaceship or whatever we were building for Wolfgang. And do you think, well, I said, well, it's budgeted. It's in the script. Had the budget. Yeah, but we're thinking, and I said, well, you're all producers. You go tell Wolfgang you don't want the extra volcano or whatever. And they said, yeah, but he likes you. I love that. They said, yeah, but he likes you and he listens to you. And I go, you know why he likes me? Because don't go tell him he can't have another volcano, you know. And I said, you're
Yeah.
all producers. I said, if I work for Wolfgang, if Wolfgang goes and tells me to paint that mountain purple, I'm starting in the morning. So I'm art director, you're producers. You go tell the director you don't want him to do the car chase through LA because you can't shut down that many streets. I know I'm budgeted for it, and I'm already building the bridge that you fall on, whatever the dialogue is. And it doesn't matter if it's $140 million movie or a $20 million movie. Somebody's going to ask you, do you really need the extra boat? I'm like, yes, I really do. And what's more to the point, the director thinks he's about to have another extra boat, So I work for the director,
Right. The wild movie called Invasion of the Bee Girls. Tell us about that experience. What was it like?
I have the script here. I was on a podcast a few years ago that's Nicholas Meyer's first script. I don't know if you know that. He wrote, I pulled it out. I have all my scripts here. He wrote this script, The Honey Factor. I used to work for Sequoia Pictures, was Fred Weintraub, who was the senior VP at Warner's. That's his offshoot company. We did Enter the Dragon with him. He saved Warner's butt with Enter the Dragon. So he bought uh, the script from Nicholas, and Nicholas and I were talking this on a podcast similar to you or yours, a film podcast. He's still mad about it. He went to New York, and while he was gone, my mentor, Fred Weintraub, who I was living at his house, and he started me in the business. I love the guy. Second father to me, really. He got another writer in, and they changed the Honey Factor to Invasion of the Bee Girls. So Nicholas got back and was horrified. And they made it a much more slanderous, hang on, I'll be right back.
Must be getting a prop for us here.
They turned for Nicholas's.
For those who are listening to the audio on Podbean and not seeing the video version of this, William is doing this from his studio, and he's got all sorts of great props.
So
and
Nicholas
he's showing
got that
the film poster for
Invasion of the Bee Girls. So Nicholas was telling the story a couple of years ago when we were talking, but I remember because we got to be good friends. This was before he saved the Star Trek Enterprise, before he'd done Time After Time, is that Time After Time? Was that it? The Sherlock, the Jack the Ripper thing. Anyway, he told his agent to take his name off of it. And as Nicholas says, his agent told him, this is your first credit, Nicholas. You need it. You're in Hollywood now. That's the way things work. So he begrudgingly got his first credit on Invasion of the Bee Girls.
Yeah. One of the actresses who worked on that, William, was Victoria Vetri. She also had appeared in Rosemary's Baby a few years earlier. Unfortunately, she's had a very difficult life. She was very good friends with Sharon Tate. She was supposed to be at the Tate house the night of the Manson murders, but she was ill. She couldn't go. She later had some difficulties with the law herself, although nothing quite as serious as what we saw with the Manson killings. Mm-hmm. I'm curious if you got to know Victoria at all while on the set of that movie.
No. I was pretty, they were pretty glamorous people to me. Victoria, and who was the lead? Or who was both the women were ex-playmates of the year. that were the leads in the picture, and
Hmm.
Victoria also, of course. And of course, I was like 21 or something, and I decorated the
Hmm.
picture, and it was fun. But I was in awe of everything. I was pretty green. I had worked on Mean Streets, and I'd worked on a few Roger Corman movies, but I, I I didn't really get until I was a prop master on a lot like Big Bad Mama and Crazy Mama with Angie Dickinson and Cloris Leachman and Crazy Mama after William Shatner was in the Angie Dickinson one. I When you're a prop master, you get to know everybody. When you're the decorator, the art director, you really don't get to know anybody. And as I became a production
Hmm.
designer, I'd walk on the stage and like the actors, like I got to know George Clooney on Perfect Storm because he hung out at the same bar I did, but I don't really know anybody anymore. And it's kind of, they know I must be somebody because I'm huddling with the cameraman and the director. So they know I'm somebody, but it's like, who is that? I kind of miss when I was prop
Yeah.
master. You're always like lighting their cigarette and teaching them how to shoot a gun and all the fun stuff that a prop master does. But no, I didn't know the two gals in Invasion of the Beagles. I played a corpse actually, besides decorating.
Oh,
Just like
really?
Roger, you got to multitask, but they cut me out of the final picture. I was so mad.
Ah,
I kept laughing. Damn, I would love to have been in it. Dennis Sanders was the director of that. A really
yeah.
cool director with a pretty good documentary past. I don't know how Fred found him to direct this picture, but Dennis was a super cool older director to me, of course, much younger than I am now, but
Hmm.
that was a fun shoot. I enjoyed that. We shot at Cal Arts out here in the outside the San Fernando Valley and made our little sets, and it was a fun movie.
Yeah. You mentioned Roger Corman on that film, but you worked with him on a number of films. I think you said 8 to 12, something like that.
Yeah.
Of course, he just passed away last year, and he was really one of the giants of the industry. What was he like? Because you apparently were quite friendly with him.
I was, and he kept hiring me to art direct a Peter Fonda movie called Fighting Mad, and uh, uh, early on, I didn't know him that well because I was just starting there, but he saw who I was. And boy, you make a mistake, you don't come back to New World. He finally fired me because on
Hmm.
one movie, oh, Moonbeam Rider with Brenda Vaccaro, and I went a few thousand over budget, or in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and he called me into his office. I'd been told I could have that money to do a scene by the production manager who kept his mouth shut standing there. And Roger gave me the classic line. I had dinner with him a number of times over the years since then, he and Julie, his wife. And he said, Bill, New World Pictures, this is before he had the other New World over the lumber yard over in Santa Monica. This is right at the beginning when he left AIP doing all these night call nurses, candy stripe nurses, student nurses. I was doing all of those. Uh, uh, he said, we never go over budget at New World Pictures. This has never happened, but I don't know, on and on and on. You never work here at New
Yeah.
World Pictures again, he told me. So one of those classic, you'll never work in Hollywood. So by that time I'd gotten in the union, so I was hoping never, I'll tell you a little aside. I'm sorry to stop here. Joe Dante, it's where I met Joe, by the way. Joe told me a funny story, and I think he's such a film historian and so terrific. I worked on two pictures for Joe, Piranha and Small Soldiers. Roger told Joe one day, maybe he told all the young directors starting out with him. Roger told Joe, though, Joe told me that, look, Joe, if you successfully do a picture for me here at New World, you'll never, two pictures for me here at New World, you'll never have to see me again. And that's very true. If you can navigate and through all the pitfalls of low budget and chaotic script whatevers and successfully make a project there at New World, studios looked at that, and the lore is correct. If you did your film school at Roger Corman's, for young directors, and they all came out of there. Jonathan Kaplan and Marty Scorsese did Boxcar Bertha for Roger before he did Mean Streets, and Joe Dante was cutting trailers there when I met Joe. He and Alan Arkish were cutting trailers there at New World. So anyway, so Roger fires me. So it's okay. Okay, Roger, whatever. So I leave. Then John Davidson, who was Roger's ex-head of production, calls me and says, "Hey, I want you to do this picture for Joe and I called Piranha. Joe's going to direct it." I said, "Oh, that sounds great, but I don't think Roger won't want me around." He says, "He's never going to be around. We're going to shoot it in the pool. You just dive underwater. We're going to be in Texas. He'll never come around." So they hired me. So I was back on the. If you look at Piranha, you'll see it's art directed by Bill and Carrie Mellon. Carrie Mellon was my wife at the time. So all the checks were made out to her account, Carrie Mellon. So she's got her only art director. She's a costume designer of some note, but she's got her own art director credit there. So I was back in the payroll at New World.
Wow. That's great.
Had dinner with him.
William, let's move ahead to 19.
Okay, sure.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I had dinner with Roger 4 or 5 years ago at my mentor's house in Beverly Hills. Fred and his wife hosted Julie, and just the four of us. And I was sitting across from him. I brought up the thing, and he said, "I don't remember that." He looked younger than me. I was right across from him. And he had just done Shark Octopus or something for the Sci-Fi Channel, and he was flying back to New York to promote it. They left that night, he and Julie. I'm like looking at him, his skin, he stayed young for so long. It was so bizarre.
Yeah.
And I don't know how old. Anyway, yeah, it was when he died. Well, you saw the tributes to Roger when he passed away, because he really was the film school for a lot of people that couldn't go to USC film school. And we just started right from the seat of our pants, with him.
Yeah.
He taught me everything. I mean, his company, how to budget, how to be a prop master, how to decorate, who a Teamster was, who a whatever was, it's just amazing, Okay, I'm done with my Roger. Sorry.
Yeah. Now, he lived till his late 90s, but in the pictures I saw, he always looked younger than his listed age.
I know.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing, huh?
Yeah. Let's jump ahead to 1980. This is a really interesting movie. You became the art designer for a film that is now a cult favorite called Blood Beach. For those who haven't seen it, and I recommend you see it, it's on Plex right now, among other streaming services. It's about creatures that live below the sand on the California coast and literally suck people into the beach. It's really Tremors before Tremors was a thing.
10 years.
It has one of the great. Yeah, that's right. It also has one of the great promotional posters, I think, in horror history. I always put it up on the Ghostly Gallery Facebook page on the anniversary. You mentioned before, this a film you really enjoyed working on. Tell us why.
Well, the writer-director, Jeffrey Bloom, was just a lovely guy, a terrific guy to work with. And we're working at the beach every day down in Santa Monica, working around the pier. Fun crew. I met Steve Poster, who, later on, ran the Directors Guild for a while, who turned into a pretty great cinematographer. I don't know. It was just fun. I wanted to do a monster movie. So I built these sets where the monster lives, and he comes in. You don't see the monster. I've got pictures around here, but I don't want to keep jumping up and interrupting everything. By the way, I've got the Italian Blood Beach poster sitting in my office down at the end of my loft here. Italians make the best posters. Even though the Blood Beach poster is terrific, you should see the Italian one. There's this whole cut up girl swirling down into the sand. It's just fun to work on a monster movie. I've got the big drawing. I've got it hanging on the wall over here. I've got the only one in existence of the Blood Beach monster. The effects guy that was hired to make the monster before I got on the show.
Yeah.
Nice guy, but not really up to the task of making a great looking moving monster, like a Rick Baker, Rob Bottin, Phil Tippett type of thing. And probably the money wasn't there to do something like that also. So you don't see it very often. And I don't think the director, Jeffrey Bloom, in fact, I know, was not happy with the monster. On the other hand, you see it enough. And, in the classic line, discussions with Spielberg and Jaws, there's a lot of tension there, not seeing what's pulling these kids down into the sand in Santa Monica. And so less is more. We had to do that. Of course, Steven had to do that also because of his malfunctioning shark. So I don't see it hurting the movie that much, really. But if we'd had a better monster, we would have showed it a couple of times more, I think. Monster, I took the monster home to my ranch out in the valley there, and it was the chickens roosted in it for many years.
Yeah. Another thing about that film, it starred a young actor named David Huffman.
Yeah.
Who I thought was very good
and
had a lot of talent. And sadly, he would die in a homicide only 5 years later.
Yeah.
He was apparently trying to help some people out in California who had been robbed.
Yeah.
He confronted the thief. I believe he got stabbed and died shortly thereafter. I really think this young man might have become a star. He was handsome. He had a great presence. He delivered his lines well. I think he's one of the great tragedies.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty cool cast, really. I mean, everybody does a great job. Marianne is the love interest that comes back. She does a great job, the actress. He's great in it. I forget the God, what's his sidekick? Yes, the Coast Guard sidekick there. Not Coast Guard, but patrol. What are they called? Anyway, there's a lot of interesting characters. Jeff was really a good director. Jeff never did anything else. By the way, that movie has never shown a profit for the writer, director, Jeffrey, or any of the producers. It's one of those weird films tied up in some weird financial limbo. So there's no really re-release of it. If you go to, you only can find bootleg copies if you go to like the Monster Cons I always go to. Jeffrey wrote, and I have it in my library, a long thing about that. And I talked to him just a couple of years ago. I've never seen a penny profit. Can you imagine? He directed and produced it, and no one even knows who the right producer is, apparently, or who has control of I don't know if the negatives. I don't know. It's a fascinating story like that, because when I go by booths where people are selling a lot of horror DVDs and whatnot, the CDs and tapes and all kinds of stuff, they're fascinated. I asked them about Blood Beach. They said, we only have a bootleg. We're dying for somebody to do a Blu-ray on it or remake it or do something, So. But when you're the writer,
the one place I've seen streaming is it's on Plex, which I think recently acquired it. I don't know if it's on any other streaming services, but Plex has a pretty good print, a pretty good copy of it. So if people want to check it out, and Plex is a free service, so that's a nice thing. One other actor from that film we should mention, great John Saxon, plays one of the investigating police officers, so he's in there as well.
Pretty cool to run into John Saxon. I've seen every old black and white movie he'd been in, and then all of a sudden I'm working on a film with John Saxon, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on. 1981. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this because this is one of my all-time favorites. And when I found out that you served as the production or the art designer on this film, I was thrilled. Dead and Buried, 1981. Absolutely love it. Rewatched it this week. First question on this, where was this film? Because it just looks creepy from start to finish.
It is creepy. That whole shoot was creepy. Well, I met Steve Poster, the cameraman on Blood Beach, and then we both went up to met Gary Sherman, and we both ended up, I guess Steve So we get Bill. So we all ended up in Mendocino shooting in Northern California, shooting Dead and Buried. And we did a lot of work around that little. Are you familiar with Mendocino up on the North California coast? It's a really uh, Victorian, saved, creepy town because it's foggy and there's graveyards all over, and you're on these cliffs. So it's the perfect location for this film. And
Yeah.
and then I built Jack Albertson's last film, as I'm sure you're aware of. We built at
Hmm.
the old Sam Goldwyn studio here in Hollywood. I designed and built a big, his mortuary where he worked on the cadavers and the cabinets where the bodies are. It was really cool set, real
Oh
spooky.
yeah.
Stan Winston, I met
So
Stan Winston for the first time. Hmm.
you built that whole mortuary. That was not already
Yeah.
there.
No, we built it all, aged it in, got the old sliding things, and um, yeah, and then I met Stan Winston. Oh, I wonder if I have that thing here.
Yeah.
God.
Great special effects man, Stan Winston, and he worked on that film too.
He did
It's a
that.
film that it didn't do much at the box office,
No,
but I don't know why, because it's a great movie.
it's kind of depressing. It's kind of moody. I've got the poster up in here, and every time I look at it, I'm like, just gives you the
Yeah,
creeps. If you like a creepy film,
yeah.
and we were in Stan's studio when he showcased the needle gag into the eye. When the nurse comes in and the
Mm.
guy's eyeballs get big and he can't move, and she comes in to kill him with the needle right into the eyeball. And I was
Oh yeah.
there in his studio on a phony head with a moving eyeball watching this. I couldn't even watch. And then we filmed the whole thing again on a stage set. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, eventually I'd work with Stan on Small Soldiers. He did a lot of Small Soldiers and all sorts of little gags later. But I always think about that eye gag. It's just, oh my God, it's too much.
Hmm.
So I met a lot of interesting people on that. Gary Sherman was an interesting, good director, pretty serious guy, and uh, it was just my only other horror movie credit, really. Blood Beach and Dead and Buried.
You mentioned before Jack Albertson's last film, and he's wonderful in it. It's
Yeah,
amazing that he was able to do it, given how ill he was.
yeah,
Did the cast and crew know that he was near the end?
yeah, yeah. I knew that he was ill and frail, but it kind of works for the character. I mean, it's a very
Yeah.
he's just that performance is a terrific performance by his, and of course there's hundreds of performances by Jack Albertson, but he seems frail and odd and mysterious, and the whole show's creepy. I remember it, like I stayed up there in the old Mendocino hotel, and like the whales are down in the ocean, rubbing on these big buoys, scraping the barnacles off their back. Boom, boom,
Mm.
these old buoys. It was a logging area there. And I was like, then I had to go over to the graveyard and work on a grave. And there's only one flaw in that movie. I had to get back to Hollywood to work on the sets. And the books were empty, union books. No, so I hired somebody I didn't know. And the only thing he did in that movie was he did this horrible tombstone that's in the graveyard that's so phony. And I do a Halloween show every year, or did. I make my own tombstones out of foam and plaster. My mom saw the movie and she said, "You didn't do that tombstone, did you?" I said, "No, Mom, that was some guy I hired that you had to have somebody up there, because I had to take care of the sets
Mhm.
down in Hollywood." And that's the one still I see always posted on like IMDb. I didn't do that tombstone. If you love that movie so much,
Yeah.
wasn't me. It was this goofball that I had to hire. He only worked on the movie a week. I had to share credit with him too. I worked on the movie for 30 weeks and he worked a week, but that's the way the union rules
Yeah.
are. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. I noticed watching it this week, it looks like it's a tombstone made of wood instead of, made of some form of rock or stone.
Yeah, it just looks
So yeah, it is kind of weird. I wanted
I
to
hope
ask
it.
you about the opening scene, which is it's at the ocean side at the
Yeah,
beach.
shooting through the
Did
through.
you have to do anything in terms of creating the netting or anything else to make that
Well,
even creepier than it was?
yeah, yeah. I mean, we. That was a long time ago. You're asking me these questions. This is a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we decorate everywhere we go. We decorate. We changed all the colors for everything, so there were no bright colors, and we did put net up and broken ship stuff, as I remember, and
Mhm.
uh, I've got the storyboards around here somewhere still. I should look at it. But yeah,
It
everywhere we
really
go,
works.
yeah, everywhere we go, we change things. Uh, I never want to shoot reality. I want to make reality on a stage or do it. I mean, that's the fun for. I turned down so many scripts that were shot on location with no sets because I always was able to keep a great crew of construction guys and set designers and illustrators, storyboard artists because they knew they'd wait for me. I'm kind of picky. I'd be waiting for a show that had a lot of design work for an art department. And that's how that, in my opinion, I don't know if other art directors would agree. That's how you keep good people around you is they know they're not going to be in some motel and you're all standing out in the prairie watching Kevin Costner on one horse. They know that if I got a
Mhm.
show, we're going to fill up a studio with our designs of how we perceive the script. So I would much rather not go to a bar. I'd rather make the bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
One
that's
last point on this film.
sure.
No, go right ahead.
No, no, no. That's all.
Okay. Jack Albertson, you mentioned, is great in the movie, no doubt. Also really good, James Farentino as the dogged sheriff investigating what's going on with
Yeah,
these bodies
he's great
resuscitated,
in it.
and his wife, Melody Anderson, great.
Yeah, she's
Yeah,
great in it too. Yeah, he is really. He's
yeah,
not like an actor I like that much, but he is great in that film. I certainly agree with you on that. And it's
yeah.
but the whole thing is so freaking creepy. It's the creepiest movie not only I've ever. It's one of the creepiest movies around, and I worked on it. I mean, it just gives me the creeps.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that makes it great, in my opinion. So,
It
all
was
right, enough
shot.
on Dead and
It was
Buried, my
shot to be.
favorite.
It was shot to be the creepiest thing around, and it is the creepiest thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Tracy, I know you wanted to pick up on a film that came out a few years after Dead and Buried. It's combination horror and sci-fi. Robocop. Take it away, Tracy.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a while since I've seen this film, but the scenery and the atmosphere was incredible. It was so futuristic. Um, can you tell us what it was like being on the set? And was that your vision for the city? And how did you balance kind of like the futuristic aspects along with trying to keep it somewhat within reality at the same time?
Well, we scouted Detroit.
Mm,
We scouted a number of towns, Houston, settled on Dallas because they had a lot of brutalist architecture that I personally liked.
mhm,
And eventually, Paul liked Paul Verhoeven, the great city hall that we turned into OCP. And it had a mixture of, it had a great skyline, that was lit up at night with, it was a beautiful city, but it had decaying pieces like Deep Elm that we blew up later on with Clarence and the guns, and I like it. And we decorated this whole. They were going to tear all that out. Dallas was. Now I think they've rejuvenated it. It's their old jazz section, their old music section, and they kept it. Thank goodness, because a lot of history for that city there in Deep Elm.
mhm,
But we looked at cities, and this fit the bill with some crumbling old that needed to be swept away, which is part of the plot, and the new city built, but it also showed the new city that was happening. So it fit the bill, and it had film crew. They'd had Dallas, the TV series there for a while. So they had a film crew, which is important because we this was a non-union picture as far as my IA unions in Hollywood. They had a sort of a union there, but at least they had people that understood what we needed in the film. They had trucks, and I mean, I brought my decorator, Bobby Gould, with me, who'd worked on the original Dallas actually, and we shipped truckloads of futuristic furniture into Dallas just because that's the way we work. But at least there was a city there that had good and bad architecture for us.
Mhm. Oh, nice. Oh my gosh. And you had mentioned some special effects. How were some of those special effects? Like, how were you able to work with the special effects team? Was that like a really good working atmosphere, and was that fun for you?
Well, I think John Davidson, the producer,
Mhm.
has said on shows like yours, it was so horrible that he almost quit the business. Now,
Oh.
eventually, he went on to do Airplane, big movies, big movies. But he's right. I mean, Paul. This was Paul Verhoeven's. I was on before Paul got hired,
Mhm.
and I I used to tell John Davidson, our producer, I said, "Why don't you just, every director in town, John, why don't you just hire one? Let's shoot this." I had Robotech comics. I was already roboed all over the place. So the script was not anything great to me.
Mhm.
I knew Rob Bottin. Rob had already been hired and I was hired. Rob was working on Robocop, and I knew Rob from Roger Corman days from Piranha, and Phil Tippett. We all worked on Piranha, making piranhas, and it's all of us under the water poking piranhas up. So I knew Rob was working on working at his studio on the Robocop suit. But when Paul showed up, when finally John, and this is where I saw the power of a producer. John said, "I'm waiting for this Dutch director, Verhoeven," and I'd seen The Fourth Man, I'd seen Spetters, I'd seen a couple of Paul's pictures. I'm like, why? But this is where I saw how great a producer, if you're a smart producer, is. He wanted this fresh take on a very American story, where someone that wasn't saddled with all the tropes and biases that an American would have. Like if I was the director, I'd say, well, the bad guy always never wins. And all the things that I think in my head, being raised on Gunsmoke my whole life. But when Paul got here, it was a whole horse of a different color. I think my take is I got to be real good friends for Paul, and he came over to my house and he got me to do Total Recall, and we all signed up again, and Rob signed up again. We all went to Mexico City and did Total Recall for Paul. But at the
Wow.
time, he hated us all. He hated American crews, hated the Texas crews. I mean, in his world, the small Dutch film world, it's a very auteur sort of thing. He did everything and he didn't trust anybody. So it took a while for him to know that, hey, we're working for you, we're on your team. So he made it very unpleasant for the producers, for the studio, for me, for everybody
Oh.
for a while. And plus, Dallas was hot and humid, and we're building all these sets around town. And then, of course, we went to Pittsburgh and froze our butts off because it was freezing in Pittsburgh for all the steel mill stuff. So it was really an unpleasant shoot, to tell you the truth.
Oh
I
my
didn't know
goodness.
I didn't know what we had until we were at Orion. I still get a check. That's the only time I've ever got a below the line guy like me ever got a residual. I got a piece of it. John Davidson gave me half a point in RoboCop, so I still get a check every year. It varies depending on every year. I was so weird. I don't want the check, John. I want my salary, but they couldn't pay my salary, so I just did it. I walked out of the rough cut screening and I saw what Paul had done. I talked to Paul about it a lot. And I couldn't believe how amazing it was. All Yost's camera work with this little gimbaled camera. It's how we
Oh,
got into the country that was shooting. He was on his belly like a reptile shooting, and Paul's brutal direction was fabulous. And this is why I could never be a producer. I couldn't see the whole thing. I was so busy doing my thing, trying to stay ahead of the company.
wow.
It was a $13 million picture. We had some money, but you use it all up, decorating all that, like the boardroom set. We built that into an empty building high up with no freight elevator. We brought boardroom tables up. We built banks of TVs. There was nothing on this floor just to sort of get that view out. So everywhere we went, it was a lot of work. Where Robo shoots everybody in the cocaine lab, the
Mhm.
decorator found a perfume machine, a bottling machine, and we turned it into a cocaine. We built all that stuff that everybody gets thrown through, all the catwalks. So everywhere we went, hopefully it looked like it was there. That's what you strive to do in the art department. But we put it all there. We built it all there. I had people running everywhere. And when Paul saw that, he finally realized, he wrote me a really nice letter. And then, of course, one day I came home from whatever picture I was on, and there's Paul at my house talking to my wife with a red script he says, I'm like, what, Paul? He says, I got this, I'm going to do this movie. We got Schwarzenegger. My wife was pregnant too. She's looking at me and Paul because he used to come over and take horseback riding lessons from my wife. We had a big riding arena thing. And he said, we're going to have to be gone a long time. I'm looking at my pregnant wife, looking at me and Paul. Ooh, man, it looks, but I had to do it because it was Paul and Total Recall. It was a year of work.
Uh-huh.
So we did it. So we got to be pretty good friends at the end, but that was a brutal shoot, Robocop. Point being, to answer your question, it was a great city to shoot in, but it was rough, man. Ooh.
Oh my gosh. I have one final question about RoboCop. So looking back, what impact do you think that RoboCop had on the world of sci-fi and action genres, particularly in terms of like production design and set design?
Well, I think, and we used this to great effect in Mexico City, Paul and I think it brought to the fore these clean lines of brutalist architecture and how they're terrific to shoot against, whether it's a robot against this. I like a clean line, a clean frame, unless I'm doing a cluttery bar or I live in an oddity shop here because I collect stuff, but you'd never know it. But film wise, I like a very, and of course, in Total Recall with Arnold, he's so big, you want him diminished in the frame. And same with RoboCop, I want to see the character against things. So, I mean, it made Rob's career, RoboCop. It's the most beautiful piece of art I've ever seen. I was looking at it. I was up in the rafters and I was with Robo and Peter Weller and we're in these dirty steel mills or down in some dirty place. And there's Rob's beautiful gleaming piece of art. It's so beautiful. I still look at it when I see a little clip on YouTube and it's just, it's like a walking, beautiful painted sculpture. And you put it in all these, dirty areas and it's gleaming and Yost lit it. He knew he had lights. In fact, me and the decorator, Bobby, we had practical lights going. Yost didn't know how to light anything. We had to light the whole Total Recall with practicals because but it kind of makes sense because the camera's moving so fast. There's just no time to light. But we found a really good gaffer in Texas who lit the film RoboCop. But it picked up light from everywhere. The way Rob painted it and his painters. So it just so three-dimensional. It's so bizarre to look at it sometimes in these frames. So it helped me. It got me to meet Paul, which turned into a very big picture, Total Recall, with Paul. And I think it made Rob's career, the RoboCop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Oh, thank you so much for sharing your memories on RoboCop. That's such a cool film. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was such a cool. It still is such a. I'm on a bunch of RoboCop sites, And it's
Mm.
amazing, the fan base for that film, and for Peter also. I see Peter signing autographs all the time at like Monsterpalooza, which is a big monster con that's here at the Pasadena Convention Center. Got my tickets for that too. Um, yeah, it was a great film.
I got to say, I love Robocop 2 for a lot of reasons, but for one reason that neither of you have mentioned, I had the biggest crush on Nancy Allen,
Yeah.
who, of course, stars in the film. She's the partner to Peter Weller. I was about 20 at the time. I still had acne, but my dream was to marry Nancy Allen. It didn't work out that way, but still a
She's
great
pretty
movie.
cool. I see her signing
Yeah,
autograph at Monsterpalooza also. She gave me an autograph last year. I saw her. They've started to make the circuit all together. Peter, her, all the gang from Ray, Fine, all the gang from the Killers. They're all sort of lined up sometimes on all these tables, and so
yeah.
I was talking to her a couple last year, I guess it was, at Monsterpalooza, and she gave me signed it to Bill, my Nancy. So eat your heart out, Bruce.
You-
I
Yeah, yeah. She remembered you, huh?
oh yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it
very
was a
good.
hard show.
Yeah,
We're all over the place on that one.
yeah, yeah. William, let's jump ahead a couple of years, more than a few years, to early 1990s. A film that both my daughter and wife love. It's not really horror. It's got some elements of horror. It's more comedy. It's a great movie. It's a classic, Hocus Pocus. And specifically, I wanted to ask about two sets: the witch's lair, their home, and the cemetery, which are both wonderful. Tell us about those.
Well, the I've got a lot of pictures and models in the other room here. Uh, that was probably next to Flintstones. Hocus Pocus was probably the most fun I've ever had on a picture. That was for a Halloween geek like me. That was Halloween for months and months and months. We built the witch's house on the at Disney on their big stage, and I had a really great crew that we'd been through a lot of wars with. We could do any movie, and so they really knew what they were doing. I mean, every board was hand sawed, every nail was a square nail, all the lath and plat. That was a set that you could walk into and shoot anywhere. There was no like a piece of plywood behind a thing or anything. All the leaded glass was real. We brought in real trees from the East Coast. I built roads into it. I've talked to Vanessa and Thora. Thora talked to me for quite a while at a Hocus Pocus thing, at some monster thing. We're waiting to go on stage. There's a lot of Hocus Pocus fans. And she said, Bill, Vanessa was 16. She told me I can't believe she's 46 this year. She and Omri are 46, 47 this year probably. But she was 10, just turned 11 on that stage. And she said to walk onto that stage, because you open the stage door and you walked up the road, it's asphalt road, and you open up these iron gates. And you walk up the road, and then there's this witch house with a stream and a water wheel turning, and you walked in and cauldrons bubbling. She said, when you were 10, Bill, like I was, that was something else. I said, hey, I was whatever I was, 30 or 40, and that was something, just to walk on that stage. So that was so fun. And Kenny Ortega, the director, I'd met him. We did some great sets for him for Newsies. We'd all worked on Newsies for Kenny Ortega. And I I'd done big business with Lily Tomlin and Bette Midler uh, earlier, so I knew Disney pretty well. This is before all the Eisenbergs came in. This was when Disney was just in this transition thing. So I knew Bette Midler and Bonnie Bruckheimer and her all-girl productions. So I knew Bette, and I knew she knew this script, this Halloween script. So I went to Disney and I said, because I'm always on the hunt for a spooky script, and they had what's called Halloween House. I don't know what it was called at the time. There were a number of names. It wasn't Hocus Pocus yet. And they said, Bill, we'd love to have you do it. Here, go tell your director, Kenny Ortega, to do it. We'd love to have Kenny do it because he's a choreographer. Bette likes him. Bette knew him from his choreography work. And He'll probably hire you because it seemed like you guys got on Newsies and everything, and, uh, he was scoring Newsies still, and he was like, "Get away from me, I gotta score." I'm like, "Kenny, you gotta do this Halloween script. It's a Halloween script. You gotta do this script." And he says that in Hocus Pocus, he quotes what I just told you. He'll tell you that story. When you click behind the scenes and the Blu-ray, whatever, that when you can flip back and forth with people that were involved talking about the script, tells a funny story about that, but it's true. And lo and behold, he did it. So I got to do my Halloween story. I mean, to be on that stage and, there's like Bet and the girls are on flying rigs. So there's witches flying, and Peggy, the choreographer with Kenny, is teaching some how to dance, and the kids are rehearsing over there, and there's like graves and bones and cats, and it was wild to be on that stage. It was like a biggest mash of Halloween. Kathy Najimy and I were on a stage once, and she said, "You should look." I said, "Boy, look at all the women out there. It must have been 2 or 3 thousand women in this auditorium." And Kathy told me, and I was wise to this. It was a very feminist movie at the time. There you had three powerful witches. You got Vanessa as a powerful witch. There's a lot of women watched it as a kid, and then they've showed their kids, and they're showing their kids. So when I go to these screenings, I see so many generations of Hocus Pocus. Didn't do a lot. David Kirshner's tells this story. They had their Halloween picture in Once Upon a Time. Was it? It was The Night Before Christmas. That's the one they wanted to release. Tim Burton produced it for Halloween, so they released us in the summer, Hocus Pocus. So it didn't do a lot of business. And by the way, Newsies didn't do a lot of business either. But of course, when it got to Broadway, it won all these Tonys, because the music is fabulous. But it was right before musicals hit. Then it was High School Musical. We were right on the cusp, I think, right before musicals happened. But Hocus Pocus started playing on TV. I knew it was going to be a perennial. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I didn't know Robocop, but I knew Hocus Pocus was going to be a perennial October film, kind of like we watch It's a Wonderful Life at Christmas every year, or The Wizard of Oz, or whatever. I knew it. And lo and behold, it was a ABC or whoever's, it's like Charlie Brown's Halloween, Charlie Brown's Christmas. It started to be played, and it built this fan base. When I go to these monster cons, I mean, there's so many Winifreds and, all the Hocus Pocus costumes there. I once in a while I talk to Mary Vogt, and I try to mention her at these, if I'm talking about the film. Mary Vogt did the costume design for the film, and she's done a lot of big movies, but those costumes are amazing. I mean, if she had a nickel for every costume I see at Halloween, she'd be a billionaire, because they're so well designed. I mean, she designed the skirts for the women. So, we didn't have CGI in those days. I mean, when they're flying, she designs softer materials, same colors, same light fabric, so it would blow with a Ritter fan, off camera. When they're walking on the sidewalks, it's their heavier, shorter costume. She did a lot of tricks to make those wonderful costumes work well in whatever scene it was needed. A lot of work on her. She and I were pretty good buds in those days. I still see her husband, John Mudo, who's also a production designer, around town once in a while. We talk about the old days. So yeah, that was one of the most fun I've ever had, being a Halloween geek. Hocus Pocus.
Oh, that's fascinating. Oh my gosh. And if you wouldn't mind, would you be able to talk about one of my favorites, the Flintstones, for a few minutes? I love that movie. I was curious, what was it like bringing the animated town of Bedrock into real life? What was that like for
It
you?
was
Was it hard?
it was daunting at first. Was really hard for me. I was really worried about it because Brian Levant, who is a huge toy collector and a huge Flintstone toy collector.
Mhm.
Perfect director for the film. He knows his Flintstone stuff. And when he hired me, and Steven Spielberg was our producer, so Steven was around. I could not figure out how to mimic in three-dimensional ways cartoon rock. It's a real puzzle for me. And I remember we had a big show and tell. Steven wanted to see one of the caves. We built samples on stage. I still have this rock. I went into my son had a big collection of lizards and snakes and stuff. So I was always in the pet store, and there was an aquarium rock. You know how they make them where the fish can go between them? They're about
Mhm.
this big, and the colors are very stripy. They're real colors, but they've been sandblasted and molded. I looked at that rock and I said, that's it. It's a real hard surface that actors can bump up against and sit on. When I settled on this is all the furniture, all the plates, all the Xerox machines, every fork, everything everywhere. Everything in that movie was manufactured, sculpted, hard coated, painted, metal armatures made, then so I ran to that weekend. The show and tell was on Tuesday. I took that to the studio, got all my painters, my construction coordinators, and I said, paint this whole cave set as big as my studio here. Paint it like this. And it looked great. The big ribbons of color. So it was an exaggerated aquarium rock. And
Very
so
cool.
here comes Spielberg and some of the producers, and Steven comes in and Brian Levant, and they're going like this. They're looking at it, and they're like, amazing. It's fabulous. The best we've ever seen. So I said, later on, I went to the bar across the way with all my friends. We just drank all night, we're like, oh my God, oh my God. And that was everything. That set the tone, that one rock. So I have it in a box in my storage area outside. I'll never let that rock go. It saved my career. I thought I was going to be fired. So eventually we had huge sets out in gravel yards, and
Mhm.
I got Dean Cundy shot it. I'd met Dean on Big Business, and we had sets all over the Universal lot, huge Stonehenge sets, big sets out in this Vasquez Rocks, which is a big national park out here outside of Los Angeles with very distinctive jagged rocks. It's the rock that you see Captain Kirk fight that phony fight with the thing. That's the rock where we built the Flintstone bedrock set. So in fact, I built this whole suburban area, huge build. We've never built so many sets. Rosemary Brandenburg was the decorator, and she was the decorator I hired for Hocus Pocus. She and her crew did a great job. Steven's coming out over the hill to see the set with the director, and we built this, all looked like a Flintstone. It looks like a miniature. I have pictures around here, but
Oh,
it's
wow.
full scale with cars, boats carved out of rock, trees carved. It was unreal, this whole suburban street. So here comes our executive producer and assorted studio Amblin people, and Brian Levant, the director, comes to the hill, and I'm waiting for him at the top of the hill before they go down, but you can see this whole thing I've built. And Steven comes over and he hugs me and he says, it's the most beautiful set I've ever seen, Bill. I'll never see a set. And Brian remembers that. Brian's talked about that too. If we go to shows and stuff together, talk about Flintstones. And it was the most beautiful thing. I mean, just think of it, everything except the Henson puppets and maybe a seashell we could buy at a store, everything was carved.
Mhm.
A woman takes a paper off her desk. That's a carved piece of hardcore foam. Every glass is carved. Every cigarette is, I mean, it was just on and on and on. As far as art department, I don't think you can get any more art department. It's not the kind of movie the Academy nominates for art direction. But me and Rosemary, the decorator, we're like, if this ain't art direction, what the heck is art direction? This is what it's all about. So, but that was
Oh, yeah.
really, the cars, we built the cars, Michael
Right.
Lanchieri, great effects guy that always worked on Jurassic Park for Steven. He was the guy and building these cars. We'd drive the cars around the studio, and the tour would go nuts. Oh, that reminds me. You want to hear a funny story about that? You want to hear
Yes.
my I'll tell real quick. I'll try to make it quick. I'm getting ready to hot lock the stage. We had this huge Stonehenge nightclub scene. They were shooting in another stage down by the tour, the whole crew. So I was by myself. I just last looks. Then I was going to get the security to hot lock the stage. And we had the band and the guitars because the B-52s were playing in a scene, and Fred and Wilma and Barney are all there. And it was a huge set, huge stage of carved everything and rugs and instruments. So I'm getting ready to close up, call the security, and I hear this screaming uh, down by the tour, which is right where the other stage was. So I'm looking, what's up? So I'm seeing this security guy and this harried, scared to death publicist coming towards me, and there's Michael Jackson walking towards me with his little niece, little girl. And I don't lock up. They go, "Here comes Michael," and Michael goes, the publicist comes. Michael had come to see Elizabeth Taylor in the Flintstones, his friend, and she'd just left. That was Elizabeth Taylor's last movie, The Flintstones, too. Talk about Jack Albertson. That was Elizabeth's last movie. We used to go to the screening room. I saw what people were telling me for years. We'd be in the screening room. Elizabeth, she loved playing that role as the battle axe mother-in-law, Fred's mother-in-law. She loved that role. She had so much fun. She was so fun to be around. So cool. I would look at that peculiar color lavender eyes in the screening room. There'd be 5 or 6 of us. And of course, her eyeball was, as big as a car in the screening room or whatever. That's the most unusual, wildest, most beautiful color her eyes were. I always remember. Anyway, she was gone. So this publicist comes up to me and says, Michael Jackson was here and Elizabeth's gone. Can you show him around the set? He wanted to see so here comes Michael Jackson, his hat and his thing. And he comes up to me. He's like, "Oh, Bill, oh, I'm good friends with Kenny Ortega, my director on Newsies." And Kenny was his longtime choreographer. In fact, the last voice you hear at that last rehearsal, you hear, okay, that's a wrap. That's Kenny Ortega's voice. He says, "Oh, I love Hocus Pocus so much. The studio's going to give me your Hocus Pocus house. I just can't wait to take it to the ranch. Oh, can I look around and see your set?" And I'm like, what am I going to say? I'll go like, yeah. So I walk around with Michael Jackson, me and his little niece, and his big bodyguard stayed there. The publicist, shaking, trembling, stayed at the door. I show Michael Jackson around that big, what was the club set where the B-52s are going to be? Can I touch the guitars? Can I sit in this chair, Bill? I'm like, yeah, sit in that chair. So it finally is over. And he's so cool and so nice and so polite and so fun. So he finally leaves. So I call security. It's about 7 p.m. I call and nobody came down. Nobody, because they were shooting the movie still up at the other stage. So I go home. I live right up the street there in Burbank. I go home. My girlfriend's there, and she goes, "What's the matter with you? You're a little late. What's up?" I go, "You would not believe what just happened to me. You will not believe what just happened to me." So I tell her the whole Michael Jackson story. So that's my Michael Jackson story. But it was so fun, that film, to be out there, and the Henson puppets were here, and Tyrannosaurus Rexes are here, and everybody's dressed as a caveman. I've still saved some chairs, and so I've saved a lot of props actually from Flintstones.
Oh, awesome. Oh, that was such a fun movie, and I think it was fun for me to watch. I can't imagine. I am so thrilled to listen
I
to
mean,
your
you be in
stories about
the
it.
town, and there's the Rock Donalds with the arches, and all the cars are going through everything Flintstone. You're walking into a cartoon. Baby carriages are going on, and when all the extras are all costume, then there's the cavemen and the bowling club, and they're all like Neanderthals. I'm like, am I having a flashback to the 60s or something? I'm like, what's happening here? It was so surreal because the sets were immense. I mean, you'd never make a film this day. These would all be CGI background stuff. But these were all 3-dimensional, 50-foot high buildings made out of stone or faux stone
Mhm.
And cars, man, it was too much. That's fun filmmaking, boy. I'll tell you, that is fun filmmaking.
Oh, absolutely cool. Oh, thank you so much. I was looking forward to asking you those questions, so
Oh yeah,
thank you.
I love talking about Hocus Pocus and Flintstones because for an art department, they're dream jobs because it's just so much fun stuff. I mean, it's
Uh,
better than working on a Dead and Buried, where it's like this gloom is hanging over everything. I know that's your favorite movie, Bruce, but it's like a movie like Flintstones, and it's like Flintstones. I mean, Hanna and Barbera were extras, and it was just too much.
And I'm a strange guy.
I know.
What I like is not
I
what
watch
everybody.
scary stuff all night long. I get it. I watch old movies and scary
Yeah,
movies, and I get it.
yeah.
But to work on it, it's unrelenting. I mean, it's not just horror movies. It's when you're working on I mean, like on Perfect Storm. I mean, that's a true story. We're shooting in Gloucester up outside of Boston, and I'm building sets, and we were building boats and tanks and water. But all these men died, and like I was just thinking about it the other day. I'm doing my research. I'm in
Mm,
Gloucester, and they have the big in City Hall of all the names of all the people that have died at sea. It's a very dangerous job, as you've heard. One of the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous job,
mm,
fishing. And we're doing a story like that. It's kind of serious work. Plus, we're working off a best-selling book, Sebastian Junger's Perfect Storm book, and we're working in this town only about 7 years after this event happened that sunk the Andrea Gale. I mean, I'm out every night with my decorator and friends, and we're dancing with like the ex-wife of the George Clooney character and the Mark Wahlberg character's sister. And like at one point, I turned to Ernie, the decorator on that show, and I'm like, God, it's like being in the movie because that's a real fishing village. That's not a photo op Gloucester. Those
mm,
are real tough kids.
yeah.
They do go in. I'd sit there in the morning, like 10 in the morning, glass of vodka with maybe one ice cube in it, and then they go out to longline or shrimping or their draggers. So that's sort of unrelenting, not like the Flintstones where it's like dinosaurs are running around and Jim Henson's kids are all working puppets and all this stuff.
so I just have one more additional question for you. So you had mentioned earlier that you've kind of stepped away from the film industry. Do you have any other creative projects or passions that you're still exploring or that you would just absolutely love to dive into these days?
Film wise, no. But like I say, I was a kinetic sculptor uh, before films and now after. And I just got back from a big show out in Joshua Tree of some of my sculptures. Some are behind me, but I've got 30 of them in the other rooms and shows. So I've been, I don't sell them anymore. That's how I used to make my living before films, selling my sculptures out of different galleries. But, there are all these Rube Goldberg kind of kinetic assemblages that arms and they move. I mean, I could show you, but you probably get the picture. If you go on my website, I think uh, go Google William Sandell. It shows you some. But so I just finished one yesterday. Another little sculpture. Actually, I finished a ghost finder with a Ouija board piece.
Oh,
Hmm,
yay.
I go to a lot of you're a
nice.
ghostly couple. I stay in a lot of haunted places. I'm always looking for ghosts. I've heard things, I've never seen one, but I'm always out there keeping my eyes open. So I've always tried my whole life. I've tried to stay like in the old days. Like I stay in the Copper Queen Hotel in Bisbee, which is renowned for its ghosts. But
Mhm.
when I first stayed there 40 years ago, I asked if I could you have a room, maybe a haunted room? No way. They said, we don't know what you're talking about. They were insulted. Nowadays, they have because ghosts are big business, right? Every hotel
Mhm.
has to have a ghost. So
Yeah.
nowadays, they have a journal out there to write your ghost adventures in. But when I used to go, I used to sit in rooms in the dark. I still do. I'm out the Little Alien out by Area 51 a lot. I'm in Bisbee looking for ghosts. I'm in Goldfield, which has the famous haunted hotel there. I've gone there by myself, wangled my way in at night. I know that that was maybe more attuned to this. I do believe that some people are there. They would say to me, "Bill, don't you see the woman by the window?" And I'm like, looking out the window. I'm like, I want to see the woman looking out the window, but I have heard a lot of banging and weird footsteps, so I can hear things sometimes. I just can't see. I'm wired that
Mm.
way. Like some people are wired that way, I think.
Mhm.
So, but I'm just doing my sculptures, living life, having fun. I have trailers. If you look up Bombay Beach by the Salton Sea, it's sort of an artist's. So a lot of artists have moved out to this dying Salton Sea, which is still the biggest lake in California. And we had a lot of old trailers. So I bought some trailers out there. So I stay in my trailers out there. I have a house that I inherited in Palm Springs. So I stay in Palm Springs a lot.
Mhm.
But look up Bombay Beach Biennale and you'll get the whole project of my artistic leanings. A lot of artists moved out there. They're kind of saved the little town. We're building big art projects out there. So I keep busy a lot.
Oh, awesome. It sounds like
Mm.
wonderful hobbies. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Oh, and
Oh,
that
sure.
sounds beautiful too.
Well, look up Bombay Beach, just like the Bombay Beach in India. Look up Bombay Beach Biennale, and you'll get the whole program there.
Mm.
Awesome. Thank you.
Final question for William Sandell. Tell us some more about this incredible comic book collection that you've assembled over the years. I mean, it's amazing. 8,000?
I got them on it when I moved here to this loft. I finally had blank walls, so I built myself. I don't want to spin all this camera stuff around, but I built myself just like a comic book store. I have comics running along the wall for 40 feet. I think IMDb says I have 6 or 8,000 or something. I gave away 2,000 comics last year just to my
Mm.
neighbors here at the brewery. But like everybody, my mom threw them away when I left home, threw my comics and my Mad magazines away. But I started collecting again when I was 20, 21. I was out and I was buying once I had a place to store them. So I started, I still go to first days of comic releases on Wednesdays and Thursdays and um I don't buy that much anymore, but I have my old collection of I love comics. I'm looking at them right now. I have about 100 up on the wall here. And maybe I will turn it around. So I just have
Ah, there
some,
we get a good sight of them. Yeah, nice, nice.
but I have them stored downstairs. Here's my ghost machine. I'm going to take that to a haunted place and see if that Ouija board will find me a ghost.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned Mad Magazine. That was one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, and
I love
then
that back in the 70s.
you probably graduated from Mad Magazine to National Lampoon then. And that's the progression, right? Comics, then Mad, then National
Yeah,
Lampoon.
yeah.
Um,
Had to
a
hide
film
that
that
from my parents, but
yeah, yeah, I know, probably a little risque, but yeah, sure. A
yeah,
film that
yeah.
talking about fun films, besides the Flintstones and Hocus Pocus, it reminds me when we mentioned National Lampoon, it reminds me of the Dan Aykroyd film I did that he directed, Nothing But Trouble. Have you ever seen that by any chance?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I designed that, and that was a
Long
huge.
time ago.
Yep. Didn't do any business. In fact, I think it had the worst per screen average of any major studio release ever. That was a Warner Brothers
Hmm.
movie that gave us $45 million, be $100 million now. Dan hired me, his only directing job. It's one of the coolest films I ever worked on. Nobody went to see it. It's a cult movie now. Pardon me. But that
Yeah.
was set after set after set at Warner's. We filled all the stages. And then the Warner Ranch out in outside of Los Angeles, up in the hills, we built 90-foot houses and moats and flaming. Just take a look up Nothing But Trouble. I still see his
Yeah.
daughter I see his daughter Daniela. She has a trailer out next to me in Bombay Beach.
Mhm.
So she hangs out up there.
Yeah.
But that was another fun one. It reminds me when I think of National Lampoon and the characters in Lampoon, I think of Dan Aykroyd, who's just a fabulous, fabulous guy. He's a big ghost fan. He is a
Yeah.
Ghostbuster. You know, he's all UFOs all over me. I see him still UFOs, ghosts. God, he's just like me. His daughter said that. God, you're just like my dad. I'm like, I am just like your
Yeah.
dad. That's why he hired
Wow.
me.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Nothing But Trouble because I think that's just become available on streaming, and they're pushing it on all the services like Tubi and a couple of others as well.
Well,
And I
yeah,
haven't seen it since it came out in the early 90s. I got to take another look at it.
maybe because Demi Moore is having such a big year. You know, I mean, she is.
Um, yeah.
The studio used to call me in, Warner's, who hired me for a lot of pictures, and they would say, "You've got to stop the bleeding, Bill." And I'm like, "What?" And they go, "With this movie you're doing." And no one knew what it was about. The Eye of Mordor was really looking towards New York because they were doing Bonfire of the Vanities. That was their problem picture, and we were the only feature film on the lot. But they couldn't stop me. I used to tell them, I said, "Look, you've got this is." They told me once, "You're our little picture, Bill." So I'm thinking 45 million. That ain't chump change back in 1980 or whenever it was, late 80s, uh, of studio money. We had all their stages. I said, "Then you got," I told actually Dan Hurd, I told he was the executive Warner's rep. I said, "You got Chevy Chase, who's your main star in those days. You've got Demi Moore, hot off of Ghost. You've got John Candy, who everybody loves. You've got Dan Aykroyd, who's a freaking Ghostbuster blues brother. Don't tell me it's a little picture." Oh, Dan heard that. Got back to Dan. He was like, he hugged me, man. He said, "You told him I heard you." I said, "Yeah." Who keeps telling me this is a little picture? Demi Moore after Ghost was hotter than a pistol. It just come out. And Chevy Chase
Sure.
at that time was their
Sure.
big star. He got 6 million or whatever per picture at Warner's. It's not a little picture to me, but we built some
No.
incredible sets on that. I'll bet you it's because Demi's having such a great year that with Substance that it's popped up back on the streaming services.
That makes sense.
Well, yeah,
Our guest has been William Sandell. William, this has been a blast. I just love this.
That's fun. I
So
love
many
talking
great
about
stories
film.
and insights. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. No, it's been my pleasure.
Yeah, certainly our pleasure as well. Our guest, William Sandell, as you can tell, a prolific production designer, art director. He's worked on so many films, so many genres over time. Just been a great episode with him. So we appreciate William's spending some time with us. We also thank Tracy Asteria for joining us as well. We thank all of you for listening and joining us in this Museum of the Macabre. And we do hope we'll see you again next time, right here in the Ghostly Gallery.